All right, let's get some questions from people. Come up and ask a question. We'll repeat it for everybody. And whatever you guys want to get into, if you want to get into what road trips are like, what broadcasts are like for us, wherever you want to go with it.
I could probably travel a bit.
Around,
right?
Yeah, you got some.
I can't believe this crowd, by the way. Thank you all for coming on a Tuesday
seriously.
night. This is amazing. Thank you all
Who's
for
got a
coming,
question?
really.
Kelly Francis.
Oh, Kelly even
Hi.
came.
Yeah.
All right.
Hardest soccer player's name to pronounce.
Mark Shatkovsky.
Really, I got that one okay. Once I got my head around
Yeah,
it.
Vaco. Yep.
Luckily, Vaco just wants to be Vaco.
Honestly, it's funny. Last year, my first season, thank God Harris Medunianen got thrown out in 9 minutes because honestly, this is really funny. Christian Higuita was one that I really struggled with.
Oh, I remember that.
Because on my card, I spell things out phonetically, and I'll put an underline over the syllable that I'm supposed to punch on. And for some reason, I thought it was Igita instead of Agita. And poor Jason's like writing notes, like, no, it's the. And I just, all night I had that mental block. I couldn't get Christian Agita. But Medunianen was when I started with. Mark Shatkovsky, though, I mean, I don't know how that combination of consonants.
Yeah.
Shabilko's a great shout over here, too.
Shabilko's a great one, too.
Shabilko's easy to say.
Once I got my head around it, Shabilko was easy.
I mean, are you talking about names that are hard to pronounce phonetically or names where it's not spelled the way it should be said?
Probably the ones that are not spelled the way it should be said.
Can I tell?
It's ones that you know how to pronounce them, but they just don't come out.
All right.
Yeah.
Can I play a little game with everyone here then for the one that I still can't pronounce properly? He's been in the league. Right, let's see who can get it here. Come on, folks. I need a drum roll here. He's been in the league probably, I'm going to say, 8 or 9 years, I'm going to guess.
Okay.
I'll give you one or two of his clubs. Let's say Dallas. Let's go with Chicago.
Oh, okay. I thought I knew where it was, but now I don't know.
Pardon? No. I'll throw in another club. You'll definitely get it. Red Bulls. And for an Irish person,
Kaku?
For an Irish person, it's incredibly difficult to pronounce, especially for someone from Dublin. There you go, Robin. So it doesn't have a TH, but I seem to think it has a TH in how I pronounce it, and I struggle with it every time to the point where I got a text off a PR guy from the club once to say, it's not that. I'm like, I know, I'm just struggling with this one. He was just traded to Nashville. Dax, there you go. I keep saying Dax McCarthy. I'm like, no, Dax McCarty. And then I say Dax McCarty, and I just sound like a complete weirdo. I sound like such a strange fella. So Dax McCarty.
Daniel Shallowy from Kansas City is one.
Yeah, because that does not
one.
look like it is Shallowy. That's the one I think is the most mispronounced around the league.
But then, like, and Jason will tell you, I was watching the Red Bulls Philadelphia playoff match, getting ready to. I mean, we were going to see one of those teams, and I'm texting Jason like, man, JP and I do not pronounce these names the same way. And Christian Caceres was one of them.
Right.
And he was saying, like, Caceres. Never heard that before. Because teams do provide pronunciation guides.
Yeah, but it's not always clear.
No.
Some
and I'll give
some
you an
are
example.
good, some are not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to die on this hill.
One sec.
I'm going to
That's a
die
long
on this
course.
hill.
Yeah, worked out.
Say our keeper's name.
Brad Guzan.
This one has went around and around and around and around for years.
What? Sure. I'll tell you something. Brad Guzan even says Guzan. No, he does. Uh-huh.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's the thing, though. I mean, this did come up with Villalba.
Here we go.
This actually did come
How
up.
How long have we got? I'm sitting back down. No more questions.
Well, and I felt so bad, too, because people are tweeting Kevin like, well, my Conti says Villalba. I'm like, well, that doesn't mean I'm right.
It's all my fault.
People were tweeting me, well, Kevin Egan says Villalba. Well, that doesn't mean Kevin's right. But
it's all my fault.
But the team finally emailed all the broadcasters about halfway through the year and said, guys, we would prefer if you say Villalba.
Well, it's because of the game I did on TV.
I think
it was
it.
after. I'm telling you, it was my fault because I went deep into this with Villalba.
And he just so happened to score a brace that day.
Yes, of course.
Right.
So we're talking about that a lot. We're calling him different
Technically-
names on the
Well,
broadcast.
technically, the club pronunciation guide says that we should call number 10 P.T. Martinez. I call him Pitty Martinez. I know it's supposed to be P.T. I know it's supposed to be
but
Miguel
it's-
Almiron, but I can't say that either. It's just words. It's like Kevin with his Irish. I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't come out absolutely pure with my Philadelphia diphthong. It's just
Pitty's a tough one because I think some people try to overdo it and say Petey. It's not Petey.
No, it's not Petey.
It's not Petey.
No, he's not Petey.
No.
He's definitely not a Petey.
Yeah, it's tough, and all of us have different accents. All of us have different backgrounds. So, and we had this conversation about Tito, and where do you draw the line on pronunciation based off how their parents would say it, which is generally where I go to, but what your audience understands. And Villalba is one that's really tricky because if you know Argentina, if you know Uruguay, you know that it would be Villalba. And I went back, and when he was signed, I'm watching games from the Argentine League, and I'm like, okay, I got this. But if he was from Mexico, it would be Villalba.
So this is do you remember where we were?
Yeah, we're in Dallas.
We were in Minnesota. Was it Dallas?
We were in Dallas when we had the conversation. Yeah.
I could have sworn we were in Minnesota. I thought we were in Minnesota, which
No, Minnesota was the greatest win in team history.
Second greatest now after MLS Cup. We had this discussion, and my point on this is that you absolutely respect the, and this is where a commentator like Derek Ray will go above and beyond to say it exactly how the player says it, which again I admire. I think it's such a tricky conversation. I'll give you an example. Let's say, and this is the one I said to you at the time. Let's say it's which was the example at the time? Vasquez, that played for Toronto, is from Barcelona. Okay, Victor Vasquez, who pronounces his name Victor Vázquez. Okay, he's from Catalonia. Are we going to do that? Are we going to say Vázquez? No. So why are we putting on accents?
I'll give you an example.
And that's
Where is the line is always the question.
And I'll give you an example on that. If you watch the Masters, does Jim Nantz call Miguel Angel Jimenez Miguel Angel Jimenez? That is actually how it's pronounced.
That's exactly my point.
But Jim Nantz doesn't say that because it sounds ridiculous coming from an American mouth.
Olazabal was the one that I always remembered.
Olazabal,
Yeah.
because it looks like Olazabal.
Yeah, and that's how it started.
Right.
And if you learn the Spanish language, like my good friend Kay Murray, who I've had this conversation with several times, and she's actually helped kind of form my opinion in a way because she learned Spanish in Madrid, spent an awful lot of time in Barcelona, so she will say Victor Vázquez. That's just the way she's learned the language. But anytime I've tried to learn Spanish, it's been Villalba, and I just don't know if trying to put on someone else's regional accent, and it's different when it's the rule, right? And I asked Argentine friends at beIN Sports at the time, and my friend Pablo Mourinho, who said to me at the time, he goes, it's Villalba. For you, it's Villalba. Please do not try and put on my accent. And I was like, I won't. And I won't. And I won't ask someone to do, if my name is Cuivin Mac Egan in Irish, all right? Cuivin Mac Egan is my Gaelic name in Irish. I'm never going to ask someone to put on an Irish accent when you say Cuivin Mac Egan. It's a really tough conversation because you want to respect, and by saying Villalba, you're 100% respecting Tito Villalba and where he's from and the way he says his name. So that's why it's such a delicate conversation.
It's one that there's not like a right and a wrong in it. It's all about your individual audience, your individual broadcast, and your individual style.
Yeah.
John Nelson's here. Do you want to talk about the Birmingham pronunciation guide? Or that one?
Well, no, that one was actually good. The Birmingham one with the French-Canadian players with Birmingham, the pronunciation Alabama style of French-Canadian names was a little interesting.
But that's the obstacle we run into sometimes where, I mean, if a comms guy from, I'll just name a team, Minnesota, doesn't have a Spanish language background, his way of spelling a name phonetically could be a little bit different than the actual phonetic pronunciation. So we do our best, Kelly.
Well,
I mean, it is what I mean, I feel like if I get an Atlanta United name wrong, that's inexcusable because there's a lot of people I can ask. If I get a Chicago name slightly wrong or I get a Dallas name slightly wrong, hopefully no one narcs me out.
No, I got one for y'all. Bienveni Kanakimana.
Stop.
Yeah.
And that was, it does not look like Bienveni.
It looks like Bienvenu.
Or Bienvenu.
Or Bienvenu, yeah.
Because John would go back and forth with Bienveni and Bienvenu, and it was so hard to get that because it doesn't look like Bienveni at all. You would never guess that's how you pronounce it. And then Kanakimana, some of the pronunciations of that one around the league.
That's sad when Kanakimana is the easy part of the name. Jeez.
Anyway, we've got a good one with the twos coming up this year, too. If you didn't see the signing today, that'll be a fun one to work on.
Senegalese player.
Yeah, I'm not ready for it yet. Not ready.
It's going to take a full preseason to get there. All right, so anyway, we all agreed that Dax McCarty's the hardest name to say.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Question.
Yeah. So this may involve maybe, I guess, a bit of speculation, but I think this past year has been really kind of interesting as kind of like the transition, or maybe even almost the beginning of a transition, where we knew kind of the beginning, with Tata, it was like all very much like that South American, bring in the DPs, kind of develop them. We didn't have like the full academy and everything yet. And I guess I wonder now, like, with De Boer and with trying to grow the academy, kind of where do you see as we go into 2020? Like, I guess I almost kind of see it as like, I don't know exactly what, but I know we're moving not completely away, I guess, from like that South American talent, but maybe expanding it to like bringing in other players from other parts of the world and or the academy, and seeing like what like with Red Bulls have done, like FC Dallas. I know those are clubs that like are known for their strong academy systems, and or I guess like just kind of what you think with Frank De Boer. I guess what do you kind of think? What combination as we go into 2020 and beyond? Like where do you start to see some of that coming in versus just where we've been with South American players, which will continue, Joe, and some of them. Like I guess does that kind of make sense? I guess I'm kind of curious about that overall culture and direction.
It's interesting because I've had this conversation with Tony Annan at the academy level and kind of what is the philosophy. And it's not necessarily possession. It's not pressing. It's not defend and counter. It's control. And it's all about controlling matches. And some matches you're going to control one way, other matches you're going to control a different way. But they always want to be in control. And I think to a conversation we had last night on our Soccer Over There show about the Copa Libertadores final that's coming up. And you have two managers that have a lot of European experience in the South American championship match and how they kind of stand out because both teams look a little different than your typical South American team. I think that's what Atlanta's going to ultimately look like. They're going to have an American, South American feel to them, but they're going to be very organized and they're going to be in control. And that's honestly where I think the modern game's kind of going anyway. Teams want to be in control of the outcome of a match. And however you control it, Red Bulls, for example, they control the game in a very different way, but they try to maintain control.
It's crazy the trends of modern soccer, again, for another podcast maybe. But I think you're spot on in what you say. And certainly I look at certain players with Atlanta United, and when you really analyse this, and you look at a player who's a player that comes to mind. I have the one player on my mind here, see if you get it, that is electric, but sometimes relinquishes that control, but can provide something completely and utterly unpredictable. It's Tito Villalba. And Tito Villalba struggled this year in many ways because you have a system that requires control. And it reminds me, I don't know if any of you watch Barcelona, but it reminds me a little bit of Ernesto Valverde. He's a pragmatic coach, and he's got this hugely expensive toy called Ousmane Dembélé. And Dembélé doesn't really feature all that much for Valverde because he relinquishes control, and it's a safer bet to go with a Griezmann or go with another player in midfield. And the same problem is there for Frank De Boer right now with Tito. And maybe this is slightly going off topic, apologies if I am, but if you've got a guy like this that 60% of the time could provide something electric, but 40% of the time could turn the ball over in a costly area and doesn't have it in him to get back and help out. Some teams, like a Cincinnati, that were built at the start of Major League Soccer last year to try and play on the counter-attack, that's perfect. But for Atlanta United, when you want to dominate and control a game like that, that can be costly.
Yeah, it's different. We talked about it a couple different ways. The word that I kept coming back to, it's used in Spanish a lot to describe a player like this, anarchic. It's not something we really use in English, but they bring anarchy. And Tito, I mean, that's the game he brings. And it's very different than I think where the team is headed. You want to create a platform for that to exist at certain times and in certain spots on the field. And I think Pitti is one that we're seeing as the year went on, found his spots to do what he does effectively and wasn't risking things in the middle of the field in bad spots. It's about that balance of control and risk. And there's some games and there's some players that you'll take that risk for, or you'll bring them into a certain game. And New York City away was a prime example where that was a game that you had an opportunity with Tito Villalba against Sebastian Ibeagha, who was a center back playing right back and wasn't a regular one. We were all excited when we saw that matchup pop up because you expect that to be a big day for Villalba, and it wasn't because Ibeagha had a great night and Tito didn't, and that happens sometimes, but that was one that you needed that anarchy, you needed that chaos a bit, and you didn't get it.
Any other questions?
But
I have really nothing to add to
that. It is a great question, though, about control. And that's the thing. I'm sure, sorry to keep going on this, speaking with Tony Annan, I'm sure he talked a little bit about that, did he? About players coming through and the style and the philosophy behind the entire club now and how these players are forced to play.
Yeah.
And I also wouldn't get bogged down by geography either. Like, I think Eric Rometty is a player that really, really fits with what Frank's trying to do. He's from Argentina. If you can find players like that in South America, in Latin America.
And players can adapt. And I mean, we're seeing it in the Libertadores final where you have River Plate and Flamengo, and you have players who maybe haven't played for that type of manager and that type of system, but they're adapting and they're adding to their game.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll get to you in just a sec.
Okay, this is another travel question. Is there a place that you have gone that's an away match where you've looked around, it's been a slim crowd, and you've thought, man, if this place caught fire,
Montreal.
This could be a really amazing venue to play. I think about Houston and I would
Good
love
call.
to see Houston really grow in notability and crowd size. But
great
what else
shout
would you
on
guys say?
Houston.
We talk about Houston a lot with that.
I mean, Houston's one player away. And I think Top Ramos was a great hire for them.
Yeah, I think they're in a good spot now.
But yeah, like if you were to get the name I always go to is Chicharito. If you could get Chicharito in Houston, it immediately turns that club around.
Blockbuster effect.
Chicago for me.
Yeah.
I think the move to Soldier Field, the reboot that they're going through. I don't know who they're going to hire as manager, but I think Chicago has. It's a big enough market where they can get that support, where they can be a big club if they have the ambition. We've heard of some things non-soccer related that they might be doing that I think will cause a lot of people to go, whoa, I can't believe Chicago just did that.
What did you hear?
Yeah, you did drop that.
Well, no, I mean, I've heard a rumor that they're going to make a very substantial change to their television presentation that I think would shock all of you. And that's as much as I can say.
They can't get any worse. And again, someone who's been there with that team, the deal they had was on ESPN Plus. All games are on ESPN Plus anyway, so they had no real advantage there. They need to get back on TV. Yeah. Soldier Field is a risky move. It's in a beautiful part of downtown Chicago. It's not the easiest stadium to get to. There's not the greatest amounts of restaurants and bars around the stadium. It's still an ask for a lot of people in that city to go there. Yeah. And they've got to try and convince. And right now, without a coach, as you head into December, it's looking bleak. Honestly, I'm just back from Chicago. I just got back from Chicago last night, and I'm talking to a few people there, and they're like, "Yeah, there's no real buzz yet. I'm not buying a season ticket yet."
They fail the Uber test when you get in the Uber, get in the Lyft, and the driver has no idea why you're in town after you tell him what you do.
It's a great. That is such a great call.
They fail that every time.
And where we do immediately get that instant, wow, Atlanta United. Sometimes you go to their stadiums and there's still not that level of support. Like Dallas would be an example. But that is a great – the Uber test is a great metric. Yeah. When we went to Seattle, we got that. When we went to Portland, we really, really got that. I'm more optimistic about Chicago than Kevin because I don't think it can get any worse than what they had.
But now you're in a huge stadium. I'm not pessimistic, and honestly, I really hope it works.
If I were Chicago, I told Jason this, I would not have gone to Soldier Field. I would have gone to Northwestern. I would have gone to Evanston. It's right off the train. The L takes you right there. Beautiful residential neighborhood. A lot of young people living there, obviously, with the college. North side of town, so there's not the same type of fear that some people might have going to the south side. I do think Soldier Field might be a little too ambitious for now, but anything other than Bridgeview is a
I
step
think they
up.
needed to show ambition. Yeah. And that's what I keep going back to when I talk to people around the country about Atlanta, is Atlanta's shown ambition from day one. It's why you have the reaction you've had. Chicago needs to show that.
Mansueto's a downtown guy as well. He wants to be close to it.
The other one that stands out to me is New York Red Bulls, because that stadium is one of the best in the league. That team has been one of the best in the league, and it's dead in there sometimes, and it's sad because it's actually loud because the building's loud, but there's not many people there, and that's really frustrating. I hope that changes.
Sorry. We'll need
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. I jumped you. I'm sorry. Yeah, no. Well, I'll tell you what.
We'll go next. No,
See, this is what happens when I try to be Jerry Springer and I go into the
I talked enough to this guy last night for like 2 hours. So
Yeah, soccer over there is a long one about the Libertadores.
Oh, well, I didn't pay for this microphone. I'm impressed you got that. Anyway, what kind of contract deal is likelier in terms of broadcast? Like a radio deal or, I guess, an expanded TV deal? Actually, wasn't the question I had in mind. The question I really wanted to say was, in your opinion, which MLS market is closer to having the type of media penetration that we have?
None.
I'm trying to think of who would be the closest.
How would Nashville do?
Nashville will be really interesting.
I'm optimistic about Nashville. Nashville. By the way, not Portland, not LAFC.
No.
All the other sports.
Just
Lakers
got on TV this year. See, the problem with LAFC New York, the markets are so big. There's so many different options. It's really, really hard to penetrate.
There's a soccer bubble that some cities have a very large soccer bubble. Atlanta has a large soccer bubble, but also, and it's blown my mind doing this, and sort of social media has been good for me, is how many people reach out and say that they never watch soccer, they never played soccer, but they listen to us on the radio and they're learning and they're getting into it. I don't think that happens in many markets. I think the soccer community, like LA, has a huge soccer community, and they have enough to support that team and what it is. Atlanta has to be more mainstream. I think Nashville needs to be more mainstream to really hit right, and Nashville could.
The one place I'm thinking of is maybe the most fickle crowd in Major League Soccer, and that is Montreal.
Yeah.
And you perform well, you get to a CONCACAF Champions League final, you bring in Didier Drogba, and then you start to make waves, but then the owner comes in and spoils it all and starts to tear things down again up there, Joey Saputo. But that's probably a market that are so incredibly passionate about the game. When Montreal is doing well, they're all over it, and so is the media.
You know, the one that might be the closest is Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City has mainstream coverage of Real Salt Lake. Now, it's a small market, but they have mainstream coverage and have a lot of coverage.
I'll tell you, Sacramento is going to be a market that I think the media coverage they will get there, deceptively large market. A lot of people don't realize how big it is. It's a one-sport town right now with the Kings, who are not the most popular in their own market. I think Sacramento has the potential to kind of be an Atlanta light, but
that's a good call.
I think we've had magic here in Atlanta because you had the newspaper of record take a leap of faith on the team with the level of coverage that they gave right away. I mean, not to toot our own horn at the radio station. I think the radio station took a leap of faith and covered it in a big way that was not forced. Well, thank you, but honestly, we wouldn't do it if it didn't make good business sense for us. The radio station has its highest ratings ever for the month of October, in any month ever. Okay, I don't think it's because the Falcons were 1-6. I mean, I think a large part of it had to do with the fact that we had soccer playoffs going on and we were talking about it.
Do you remember when I first moved here and I sent you
a
video? I sent Mike a video
like,
from the car.
Egan's listening to a sports flash.
I shoot. It was like my first day in this. Like, as a resident living in the city, I'm driving somewhere and I turn on 92 on the game and I turn it on and there's Mike straight away. I pull in, take a little video. They're like, come on, Mike. Let's go.
But this is why I think like Nashville's a good point. Sacramento, I think it's going to be an expansion market because you need full buy-in from your newspaper of record and a broadcast outlet with large reach immediately in order for it to become what it is here. unfortunately, I think we'll use Chicago as an example. WGN's been talking about the Cubs for 80 years. How do you get WGN to start talking about the Fire? Philadelphia. The Union just had their best, and I'm from Philadelphia originally. The Union had their best season ever. Jason sends me a tweet, I think the Thursday before we played them, that Jim Curtin was going to be on WIP, their sports talk station, at like 9 p.m. on a Thursday night. That's unheard of. Jim Curtin has never been on WIP, the sports talk station there, ever. Jonathan Tannenwald is an amazing soccer writer, one of the best we have in this country, if not the best. His publication wouldn't fly into Atlanta for the playoffs because it wasn't in the budget. So, and Philadelphia has a robust following and really passionate fans, but their media did not buy into it right away, and now here they are. So we were lucky here in Atlanta. I think Jason is a big reason why this occurred, because Jason was talking about soccer and carrying the banner for soccer back in the Ruckus days and back in the days where MLS was just a fleeting thought here. And to light that torch and to do the work that you did as a kid, calling Jeff Hollinger and talking to sports anchors in town and trying to get the word out, that was very, very important. Those were very important seeds to plant. But Atlanta United gets the level of coverage it gets now because there is an audience for it, and it's proven. Yeah. And for those of you who own businesses in this room or control advertising dollars, thank you. Thank you for supporting what we do on the radio station, what SDH does, what the AJC does. That's very, very important because we have to demonstrate a monetary return in order to maintain this level of
Fox
coverage.
Sports South, please.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Fox Sports South. What am I thinking? Yeah, of course. We even share the same building.
I'm reading a book right now which is fascinating. It's called Blockbuster. And it's all about the blockbuster effect of sports and media, and it dives into whether it's a Lady Gaga album or whether it's the Galacticos era of Real Madrid. It's by a professor in Harvard called Anita Elbers. And you see the likes of Gerard Piqué and others going across to take her course during the summer. And it's all about this, the business model, how you can build from the start. There's no better man than Darren Eales in this country at doing that, and it's diving right into the communities at the very start. And I was reading from afar about how Darren's out in every single community at the beginning, making sure everyone has Atlanta United flags, and it's just the blockbuster effect of saying, well, we're not going to go with a big name like a Wayne Rooney, but what we're going to do is we're going to educate you on a Joseph Martinez, a fella who scored 7 goals in 56 games for Torino as a wide guy, who now we're going to bet on coming up and playing here up front, which I still think is one of the most under-discussed success stories in Major League Soccer history. The fact that you can pick a guy like that who wasn't a proven goal scorer for his international team or for his club scene, and yet he can come here and do this. What is it now, 78 goals?
88 in all competitions.
88 in all comps.
It's crazy.
78 in MLS, right?
Yeah.
And basically what amounted to maybe 2 1/3 seasons with all the time he missed.
88 in all competitions and 100 games in all competitions.
But it was on Atlanta United, right? And it was on, and you're right to point out Jason, because Jason did an awful lot of this, educating everyone as to who Miguel Almiron is. Why we should be excited about a guy like Miguel Almiron, you know? And again, like Darren says, credit to Tito, joining before the stadium was built, joining before the...
And really quick, Jason doesn't know this. When I was told that we were going to start broadcasting Atlanta United in 2017, that deal came very, very quickly because the Falcons were in the Super Bowl, and getting an English language radio deal in place for Atlanta United was not a very high priority for Arthur Blank at that time with his team in the Super Bowl. But I remember when I was told that we were going to have Atlanta United on the radio, I remember our program director, Terry Fox, said, we hired someone, I'm not sure if you've heard of him, his name is Jason Longshore, and he's going to be doing the broadcast. I thought, we got Jason Longshore? Because, and I've never told you that story before. But that was my reaction, like, whoa, I don't know who the other guy is, but we got Jason Longshore? I mean, this is huge for us because as a casual soccer fan, I was into soccer, especially at the international level. I didn't follow MLS that closely, but I knew who Jason was because Jason was doing incredibly important work in the lead up to the first match to educate all of us about what we had here. So thank God for you.
Well said. Well said.
Really.
Thanks, y'all. But the thing is, like, there's people like me in these other cities The problem
we
that
need
they
to give them
have,
megaphones,
that's
unfortunately.
it. But that's it, because 92.9 is what kicked it up a huge notch for me. I mean, SB Nation was great with Dirty South Soccer, and that was a huge outlet for me to start writing and getting into it and then podcasting. But it was 92.9 that when you have that type of megaphone to do it, and then you have show hosts in every part of the day who are willing to talk about it, because that doesn't happen in most markets.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember hosts coming up and saying, like, I'd love to have you on, but I don't know anything about soccer.
But
and I'm like, that's cool.
You've just nailed on the most important part of all this. I listen to 92.9 The Game, and the hosts don't pretend to be experts. They'll happily say to you,
well,
no,
one
which
does,
is a great, no, but it's a wonderful and humble thing about the guys there.
And I want to dispel a rumor, by the way. The Falcons never put pressure on us to talk about the club ever at any point. Okay, that we didn't start talking about the club because Arthur Blank ordered us to, or because the Falcons put pressure on us to do so to help promote their. That's not what happened at all.
Right.
I've seen that out there. That's not it. It really did happen organically. The club was smart in reaching out to our hosts and making sure tickets got in their hands, so they could experience the product and then come back and talk about it. So, anyhow,
Long overdue. Sorry.
It's fine.
that was my fault, by the way. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine. So I am a terrible tactician, and I've basically learned everything that I know about tactics in soccer from you guys, mainly Jason, on the way home with a full-time report. But basically, I've always wondered, with regards to the player-called meeting in the middle of the season where, they met with DeBoer.
The player called meeting.
Oh, yeah, the player-called meeting, yeah. What percentage of the playing style before that and after that would you say was DeBoer versus the 2018, I guess, stubbornness from the players trying to keep it going with what they knew?
There were a couple that were talked about. Is it after the All-Star break?
Was it
Is that
that late?
the one? I want to say there might have been another one. I think all of it's DeBoer, and I think that a lot of the end of it is the players as well, because you can't. Any manager's not going to let the players run the show. You can't. Now, a great manager will take input and will make adjustments, because the players can't play well if they're not comfortable, if they're not happy, if they're not enjoying their game. So the other thing that factored into that, too, was a little bit of luck. I mean, you had the game in Seattle.
Robert Sabiga, Jason.
Yeah.
Just say it. Just say it,
Yeah,
Jason.
it was Robert Sabiga who made that happen, going to a 3-5-2, because you had the Breck Shea injury, but at that point, you still had Franco Escobar who could play on the outside, and you might be able to piece things together and play a 4-3-3. But then you had one of the times, because it's not the only time, but one of the times that I lost it on a broadcast.
I've never seen you that angry.
About a referee. Maybe the Matias Almeida send-off was the other one that got me angry.
I think you were just shocked. Like that's as angry as you've ever. Yeah.
Okay, we'll get there in a second.
Well, actually, you know what was the funniest? The most angry I've ever seen Jason was the match we did not call, which was the Open Cup final. So
Yes.
U.S. Soccer wouldn't let us do a live broadcast, but we could do a pre-match and a post-match
Right.
show. So we're watching in our booth, and I'd never watched a match with Jason just watching. We were always calling the match. So it turned into Jason kind of doing play-by-play and me doing analysis, which was probably remarkable. But when
wasn't much play-by-play.
Leandro got sent off by Alan Chapman, that's as I thought Jason was going to throw something. That's as angry as I've ever seen Jason at a referee.
Because I got to be a fan that day.
Right.
Like,
Right.
from the booth, and luckily nobody could
And
hear
then
us.
Jared
but
Smith was in the booth with Jared goes, I really wish I could have played for you. The way that you yelled at that. Right?
Oh, man, I forgot about that one. The Sabiga yellow card to Franco Escobar, though, because that took away any option to play four in the back. Because we talked about it. That was one where we chartered back.
Right.
And we're sitting there on the plane like, what is the lineup going to look like in 3 days against Houston?
And I think the transfer window was closed, was it not? I remember Darren
The
was
Houston
on
game
the
was
phone.
July 17th.
Okay, so it was still open,
Yeah.
because I remember
This game.
Darren was on the phone before we got in the van. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, he's calling this guy.
Yeah,
And I think that's when they made the Mo Adams move, wasn't it?
Around that time. It was a little later.
So that might have been
In the works.
We're
it
thinking like
works.
3 days. Like, what? Like, I'm going through the options to play 4 in the back, and it's like they can't do it. Like there's no way they can do it. They could go 3-5-2 or 3-4-3, and they went 3-5-2, and that sparked a lot.
I remember our injury report graphic for the Houston game in our pregame show, and it was so funny to look at. You're like, there's Mikey Ambrose, there's Breck Shea, there's Franco Escobar, there's George Bello. The list goes on. All the fullbacks
Every
available.
left back imaginable.
Yeah,
so now, that's when we got help from a ref, because quick trigger Penso sent off Albert Ellis in like 5 minutes.
Yes.
But I still think they would have blown.
I agree. I agree.
That day, there was something about the team that day that was a little bit different, and I think it was the element of luck. To go back to your question, I do think the players had a big say, though. Sorry.
I agree.
I think the players, you heard it from the likes of Leandro Gonzalez Perez. We're going to get back to playing our way, and there was that conflict earlier on in the season between manager and player. And Frank de Boer, in a very humble way, came out to say, and he openly said to us in a conversation, which was on the record as well, saying that we adjusted, and the players wanted to adjust, so we had to adjust with them a little bit.
That's good management.
Yeah, of course it is. Absolutely agree.
I think people tried to spin that at times as a negative. I look at that as a huge positive. Because you have to be able to adjust to how your players are comfortable. And in that situation, I think Frank de Boer absolutely did.
And Frank must have, obviously, and this is something I asked him when we did that sit-down interview, he must have had Inter and Palace in his mind a little bit as well, in the sense that I've got to adjust here. The players are striving to do something a little bit different. And I want to be successful here. I need to work with the guys. They need to work with me. And ultimately, listen, this show and this conversation would be a lot different if Atlanta United maybe had a little bit more luck in the game against Toronto and hosted an MLS Cup final and then beat Seattle Sounders. We'd be talking about, arguably the best season in MLS history.
The best. I think there's no question it would be the best.
Yeah. So it's a tough conversation to have because you analyse the season a little bit differently. It was still incredibly successful, but all in all, the players coming together. Joseph Martinez, the personality that he is, dealing with a big person. Frank de Boer is a legendary player. He's a huge personality in the game, and at times you're obviously going to have clashes. Tata Martino had clashes too with the players, and worked through it. So. Credit to them.
Think back
Ultimately,
to Houston to start the 2018 season, because what was the conversation coming out of 17 was we've got to be better defensively.
Yeah.
We have to be better defensively. We're working on 3 in the back. You played 3 in the back that day, I think,
Jeff
and it was really bad. And then you started to adjust, and that season you went back and forth, 4 in the back, 3 in the back, 4 in the back, 3 in the back.
Parkey was on the bench that day. I remember.
Houston because he wasn't fully
the only
fit.
game he didn't start.
Yeah.
Jeff Lorenowitz was the center back.
And you had the injury to LGP, and Parkhurst came on first half after it was already really in a bad way. Right. But that 2018 team had more ups and downs than we remember.
I agree.
Because of how it ended.
100%.
But even the playoffs. I mean, think back to Toronto. Think back to how we felt on decision day after the loss in Toronto and what our vibe was going into Yankee Stadium.
Oh, I remember being in that dive bar in Westchester, wherever we were, the night before, where the team was staying.
Yeah.
And we were eating with Justin and Chris Winkler, and maybe Ryan Katniss was with us. And
excuse me, you have to say his name right. Justin Velhouse, most eligible bachelor in Atlanta.
I thought Justin was here tonight, actually, at table 66 for a moment.
That's a compliment. Justin's a handsome fella.
You look a lot like him. I'm like, wow, Justin's here. And I remember we were sitting at that dive bar, and I said, can any of us identify a match where Atlanta United has won on the road in club history where we did not expect them to win?
Mm-hmm.
And we really kind of have to bat that around a little bit. And I think to that point, you might not have been able to say that yet. They did have the greatest win in club history at Minnesota at that point.
Of course.
But they surprised us, I think, a little bit.
I remember getting on the bus to go to the stadium that day, and the pregame show from MLSsoccer.com was on, and we're watching it in the bus with team staff. And everybody picked Red Bulls to win, or NYC
goals.
to win by 2 goals.
Multiple goals.
And picked them to win the series. Yeah. Everybody. And we're just like...
You know what's crazy? Parkey and Jeff Laurentius have both told me separately, we win the Supporters' Shield, we don't win MLS Cup.
I would probably
agree. If we
agree.
win that game in Toronto, we do not win MLS Cup. We had to change,
And changed drastically. You think the changes this year were dramatic. That change was the most dramatic. Because you went to a true defend and counter team. Completely.
And to the point where you get to MLS Cup, and I know the players won't admit this, but there was a vibe about the stadium. We were never losing that game.
No.
There was something about the
No.
mood that day amongst the fans. You could see
I remember
the
saying that.
swagger. There's a great photograph of Miguel Almiron. He's just looking up at the Halo board, and there was some level of confidence about them. He was taking it in. Final game for Atlanta United. We all knew that then, and there was never going to be any other result.
Atlanta United won the MLS Cup when that full stadium tifo was unveiled against Red Bulls. That was the moment where the cup was won. I really believe it. I know that sounds corny. I really believe that because we're podcasting, right? We're not broadcasting.
Right.
You could see the Red Bulls players with that holy shit look in their like, what the hell?
You're going to force him to edit this now.
Yeah, now I got to go back and edit.
Sorry, mark it at 9:06.
All right, fair enough.
They won the cup that day, I think. Because from there, I mean, look, 3-0, you don't give up a road goal, it's a wrap. It's over. And I really think that set the tone for that whole series, and that's where the cup was won.
What's the angriest you've been, Mike?
I really don't get angry because I love doing it so much and I'm having so much fun doing it. It's hard for me to get angry. I will say the very obvious penalty in Portland involving Pitti getting dragged down from behind and his leg cut out from under him, and it wasn't until we got that angle that Kat Gutierrez, Atlanta United's video person, shot in the video they put out a couple days later, where we really had conclusive proof. But the fact that VAR didn't step in, I mean, even Darren called me afterwards and said, you were, well, I can't tell you what he told me exactly, but needless to say, he didn't really disagree with my call. That was the one time I just got so angry, because that was a couple times where Pitti had been kicked or fouled in the box or had drawn clear and obvious penalty. And, in fact, it was right after the New York City match where he drew the penalty in stoppage and Pro rebuked the referee. And it's just you got to a point where you feel like you have to defend the guy a little bit. Oh, yeah, that's a good one, too.
That was a fair call.
New England one?
I didn't think that was a penalty.
I didn't think it was a penalty, but the simulation was the yellow card was terrible.
That's what we said on the full-time report. I have no problem with the penalty. I do have a problem with the yellow. Because you're putting him on a tightrope for the rest of the playoff by showing him a yellow for simulation. Yeah. You cannot simulate if they made contact with him.
That just never gets called.
Yeah, that's
the
not
thing,
simulation.
It never gets called.
If you got hit and you fall down, you fell down because you got hit.
Mike.
But a yellow there?
I'm not agreeing with you on that.
But a yellow card?
In a playoff game?
It doesn't matter if it's a playoff game. It doesn't matter if it's the first minute or the last minute.
But it's never given as a yellow card.
It doesn't. Listen. I don't agree that it was a yellow. I'm saying I disagree on the point where if you have any contact, it can't be simulation. You could, if I do this and Jason decides to start rolling down the stairs.
Well, no, there's a
but who gets to make the determination on what level of contact?
Yeah.
I mean that's the gray area.
Simulation and embellishment are two different things.
Right.
If there's contact, you can embellish it and try to get the call. It's when you completely dive where there's nothing there.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's got to be a yellow, but this one,
you're
it's
right.
Close enough.
I agree.
Early in the game too.
Not a penalty, not a yellow card.
Yeah.
That would have been my
I'm fine with that.
On that. Yes, up here. If you, Robin, come on up the front a little bit closer. And make sure
Okay, so obviously Atlanta United has set the bar for expansion clubs, right? With the success of LAFC next, and now all the new expansion clubs coming in. Obviously, I think they have a bar now they want to meet, and everyone just hopes that they can reach the heights that Atlanta and or LAFC hit, right? So, do you think that puts pressure on like a Chicago Fire and New England and those teams that are existing teams? Do you think it puts pressure on their owners to step up now and start investing? And
I think they have a challenge that's different than the expansion teams. I think the expansion teams, let's divide them into two for a second. So you have Atlanta, you have LAFC, I think Miami you can put into that are going to be big, bold, go out and spend, and they want to win as fast as possible. You have Minnesota, you have Cincinnati, you have Nashville. Honestly, I think Sacramento will fall into that group. I think Austin could fall into that group. St. Louis, I don't really know where they're going to fall yet.
I also think starting from a USL infrastructure starts you from a different
that makes
spot.
it difficult too. That definitely changes the paradigm a little bit. But the teams like a Chicago, they're not original, but they basically are. They were 2 years in. They have history to overcome when the league was different. And the perception of the league and the perception of the sport in those markets is very different because people thought MLS wouldn't last in 1998, 1999. And here, we haven't known that. So I think the comparison that somebody had that really stuck with me is think of, like, if you have grandparents or great-grandparents who went through the Great Depression and always went through, like, penny pinching. Even later when they didn't need to, they still did because that's what they lived through and they were scared they'd go back to that. I think you have some owners in MLS who that's how they think, is they're still afraid that the league could go away. It's not going away. It's past those days, and the new teams coming in are giving that lifeblood to it, but you've got to get some of these big cities and these big markets to think about it in that way, and Chicago's the prime example. It feels like a little bit of a reboot there now, and hopefully they'll embrace this.
Look at what Chicago's won. MLS Cup, 4 Open Cups, and they felt at the time, and a lot of people felt it was the right decision to take that team to Bridgeview to have a soccer-specific stadium, and in many ways it was the right decision at the time.
At that time, I think it was.
Exactly, and that goes back to what Jason's saying about the owner's mindset has changed, and the ones that are changing that over time, obviously, the league office doing a decent job, and growing the league, but also Arthur Blank deciding to be heavily invested and give it everything. The same can be said, I'm sure, of LAFC and Miami, like you say, Jason, is spot on. The league have to put pressure on, and this goes back to the promotion relegation argument and everything else with that. There is no great pressure on a Kroenke in Colorado. He's watching his asset appreciate.
Right.
He's not going to get relegated. So you've got to find a way to put pressure on him. If he's not bothered by what the fans say, well, then he's going to sit on it, which is a shame, and it's just the structure of the league.
I have a slightly different view. I think what's happened in Atlanta and with LAFC actually puts a lot of pressure on Miami, on Nashville.
Yeah, I think Miami.
I think
especially.
Miami, the expectations.
Of course.
No doubt.
Look at Miami right now. Like, we've been waiting for these big moves. We've been like, what's Miami going to do? What are they going to do? And they haven't built their team in a bad way yet, but we're let down a little bit.
But I also think what it's saying, even not for Miami, for Nashville, for Cincinnati, for Austin, Sacramento, St. Louis, is, well, now, wait a minute. Atlanta, year one, made the playoffs. Year two, won the Cup. LAFC, year two, had 74 points. So we're going to expect something pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. I think it's not going to be the way it used to be, where there's going to be a degree of patience. Oh, well, you're an expansion team.
3 years
3 to 5
to be
years.
good. You're not going to get that anymore.
You don't get that anymore.
Mm-mm.
I mean, we had LAFC make the playoff in their first year. We had Atlanta make the playoff in their first year. Miami's going to be expected to make the playoff in their first
year. Mike brings up a brilliant point, though, with the USL side, because there's a difference with Minnesota and Atlanta, too, in that Atlanta United needed to be hit straight away. And the fear from the outside, again, looking in, was that Atlanta sports fans are fickle. That was the message everybody was hearing. And that if the team is not successful from the get-go, that fans could fade away. Whereas in Minnesota, there was already a fan base there from NASL days at the time, and they were ready to stick with the team, even though it was a bad start.
Where's Robin? Robin.
I wanted to hear the story about getting kicked out of Orlando.
Oh, getting kicked out of Orlando. Okay, yeah. So
yes.
that was the bottle throwing game in May.
God, that was
Mother's
a wild
Day, right?
night.
Wasn't it Mother's Day of 2018?
So you threw the bottle?
No.
Everybody else
at
did.
us.
Yes.
Now, you have to remember something, too. I don't want to say that the rivalry has dulled in any way or that there's less intensity in the rivalry now. That might come off incorrectly. But there was a certain something about that Mother's Day match in 2018.
That was big.
I mean,
Orlando was coming on a 6-game winning streak.
Exactly. Orlando was on fire. They were a raging inferno. Right. And Atlanta was a little wobbly at that time. Remember, that was in the span where they had the Red Bulls match. They had a draw against New York City that they probably should have won. SKC was around that time. In fact, I think SKC was the Wednesday prior.
I think it was.
So Orlando's thinking, okay, we got this. Atlanta's wobbly. Packed house. Humid night.
Yeah.
I mean, all the ingredients of what you get in a match at Orlando. And it was very intense, and Will Johnson did what he did at the end. And And there were the bottles thrown, and that was in Atlanta comes out with a 2-1 win. So we do our full-time report. We pack up. We head downstairs. Jason's custom when we leave a stadium is to take a photo of the empty stadium and post it to Snap.
Do it on Instagram.
To Instagram. Well, when we went down on the elevator to go down to street level and get into an Uber, we made a wrong turn.
Yeah, Orlando's kind of a weird stadium the corridors and stuff.
It's not a very big stadium. And the elevator from the press box down should take you to a loading dock, but there was a fire door, and we went through the wrong door.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was mistake number one. Mistake number two was we had removed our credentials because we were walking out of the stadium. We don't need them anymore, right? So Jason takes a detour. I walk out. Jason takes a detour to get into the seating bowl and take a photo.
Yeah, I took it from like the edge of the concourse, like right across the way from where you were.
And already I'm noticing now that there are 4 or 5 people wearing purple polo shirts who are looking kind of suspicious.
On a cart.
On a cart.
Going back and forth.
We're wearing Atlanta United gear, obviously. I'm toting radio equipment. I engineer on the road. We don't pay for an engineer. I engineer. So I have our Pelican case of radio equipment. So it's pretty obvious. When the thing says Atlanta United Radio, it's pretty obvious what it is. And the people on the golf cart approach Jason and I and say, the stadium's closed, you have to leave. And I think I said, okay, yeah, no problem. We're leaving anyway. And then one person who is anyone from Central Florida originally? Am I going to offend anyone? one person who's like central casting, Central Florida man comes up to us. I mean, I think he, probably weighed like 280 pounds. He's got, his belly, and I can say that because I'm fat. He's got his belly hanging over his security pants or whatever. He goes, I'm going to escort you off the premises now. I go, whoa, wait a minute. No, we're leaving anyway. It's okay. And he goes, I understand you're leaving. I want to make sure you don't come back. And it was raining.
It's raining.
And
I'm actually talking to John on the phone because
right.
he was asking how it went because people were screaming at us during the broadcast.
If you've been to Orlando City Stadium or Exploria Stadium, it's not in the greatest part of town, and the little alley behind the press box is very poorly lit, and it did not feel like the safest situation for us. But they guided us out of the perimeter and locked the fence behind us. And that was pretty much it, right?
It's my fault.
I was hoping they were in some sort of a scrap. And
No. We don't roll like that.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that.
No,
Nobody
but we
could get to us.
We got forcibly ejected from Orlando.
Reed, anyone who wants to ask, could you go up? Reed, do you want to go? Or were you first?
Okay, so complete change of subject, but Thierry Henry in Montreal, A, how fun is that going to be? B, how do you rate his chances? And how much fun is it going to be if he flames out?
So we talked about it on Soccer Down Here. We were coming from different sides of it. I don't know how Kevin feels about it because I have not talked to him about this. So Thierry Henry hire, yay, nay?
I feel for young coaches that are incredibly successful that never get opportunities because they're not a big name. Henry has worked hard, and he's worked hard with Arsenal. He's worked hard with Belgium. He obviously had a 3-month stint at Monaco, which didn't go well, and it was difficult for a lot of reasons. The club sold off all their best players, and he had to try and do his best, and it was a disaster. We just kept hearing at the time from our correspondents in France how bad it was at the time over there. I'm not surprised at all because it's Montreal. I don't know if he would have gotten a Major League Soccer job with many other teams. And I think you've now got a situation where you've got no Zlatan anymore, so you've maybe got the biggest ego in MLS versus the second biggest ego in MLS. And that is listen, I don't. Yeah. I say that just because of the track record. Joey Saputo is notorious for being tricky and injecting himself into situations. He's the owner in Montreal. And you've got Thierry Henry, who is an ego. He's a massive ego. And he's got a personality. And he's not afraid. Ask anyone that's played with him with the Red Bulls. I remember talking to Stephen Keel about Thierry Henry when he played for New York. And he said the training was impacted. One day you'd go to training and Thierry was in a great mood and everybody was on fire at training. The next day Thierry mightn't be in the best mood. And he's chopping guys down, and he's got to manage that. He's got to mature. If Thierry Henry wants to be successful and a leader of men in this locker room, he's got to develop as a coach and work with Joey Saputo and work with a media group that won't be that patient for Thierry Henry. So I think I think it's tricky. He is a guy who's obviously. I'm sorry for having a long-winded answer.
No.
He's a guy who's, he's played for Arsene Wenger. He's played for Pep Guardiola. He's played with a World Cup winning France team, a Champions League winning side like in Barcelona. This is an incredibly talented, one of the best players that's ever played the game, and a player who I'm sure is incredibly astute and understands the game at an astronomical level. So how can he communicate that and get the best out of the likes of Samuel Piet and get him on side as the captain of the club? It's a massive, massive job for him. Huge, in the sense that if it goes wrong, people might say we're not touching Thierry Henry. And I hope it goes well for him. I really do, because he's a legend in the game, and I'd love to see him succeed in MLS.
I think it gets the buzz, but I'm not optimistic it works out. I think the track record, you have to be concerned about it, and that ego and that side of it, because he's going to be managing players who were not at the level that he had at Monaco or at Belgium. And is that going to get him frustrated? And is he then going to be able to deal with Joey Saputo, his boss, in his ear, and coming into the locker room, like what happened late in the season with Wilmer Cabrera? Right. So how is that going to go down? It just doesn't look like it's going to go well.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this on SDH. I think there is a possibility that Henry was the only one who really wanted that job.
No, I disagree. MLS jobs right now everywhere. There's coaches all over the world.
Even for Joey Saputo.
Yeah, even Saputo.
Yeah. A chance to go to Montreal.
A shorter list, maybe?
Montreal, the worldly view of Montreal is an incredibly sexy
you're right.
and cool city.
And Montreal's a sleeping giant in this league. I totally agree with you there. And I do think Henry brings them some really good buzz.
They're saying they're selling tickets because of it. So.
And let's look at it right now in MLS. I mean, we've got DeBoer, Henry, Schelotto, Matias Almeida. We've got some really big names managing clubs in MLS.
We did our five-a-side teams of managers in MLS history.
It'd be pretty good right now.
Yeah.
You can do a good one from Americans.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Bradley and Arena. I mean, these are good things for the league. Bradley and Arena not as players.
Oh, no,
right?
neither one.
I thought that was a joke. That was a good joke.
I think Bruce got a cap, though.
Bruce got a cap?
He got a cap, I think.
Like 1974
something like that, yeah.
One cap.
He had one cap.
Yeah.
He was better at lacrosse.
Okay. Well, yeah, anyhow. Yeah, but I'm kind of conflating my point now. I think he's going into a challenging situation. I do wish him well. I think a strong Montreal is good for the league.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And I think, look, he's obviously French. You have a cultural fit in Montreal right off the bat. Yeah. If it's helping them to sell tickets, then this was a good move. But we'll see.
That's the trip that I would tell you guys, if you have not been to Montreal, that's the one to pick for next year, especially with this. Yeah. That's my favorite trip.
Mrs. Claus might say Portland, though, because she did Oregon wine country, right? So, where's Santa tonight, by the way? I thought Santa was coming. He's at the North Pole, I guess. Right?
Making a list. Checking it twice.
Oh, in Philly. I'd rather be in the North Pole than Philly.
So I know
you had a question, though, right? Okay.
So, Atlanta United news of the day. Vasquez gets taken in the draft. I'd love to hear y'all's opinion on that. I know we lost Romario as well. Do you think we can expect picking up a backup striker in the offseason?
Yeah.
Love to hear your thoughts.
I think you have to.
I think Atlanta United needs a killer on the bench. Atlanta United needs a striker who you know is going to give you double-digit goals in a season. Even with Joseph Martinez there, you know someone who's going to... I think we talked about this briefly, about just throwing names out there, one or two guys around the world who could be good enough to accept a bit part role, knowing that you're going to come in later on in games potentially, but still be that danger man and maybe offer something a little bit different. Brandon's so talented. He really is. Brandon's got so much going for him. But for Brandon Vasquez right now, this is a great move. Brandon's going to go to a city in Cincinnati,
play a ton
with some brilliant fans, a cracking city, an outstanding city here in America. And Brandon can go there, and Brandon can start. Brandon can be a star in Cincinnati. It's a shame to see him leave.
Play.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a real shame to see him leave. But I'm kind of delighted for Brandon Vasquez.
Yeah, I am.
I think he can go and do well.
Yeah, you need somebody, and the thing you said about somebody who's a little different, that's what you need, because you see games sometimes where it's not clicking, and you need either a big target or something different than Joseph, or somebody who can play with Joseph from time to time. And last year, you look at the goal scoring, Joseph had an unbelievable year the last 2 years, but last year you didn't have a secondary goal scorer. You know, Julian Gressel in all competitions scored 10. That was second. You know,
look at year
you
one.
Need somebody
Tito
else.
was double digits in goals and assists year one.
You had Miguel
absolutely need
scoring goals in his 2 years. Like, you need another threat because it's just too easy when you don't have it. But it's the something different that I go back to. And Brandon, in his point in his career, he needs to go play. If he's going to be a star, a potential national team player, I mean, this is a youth national team guy from before he came to Atlanta. He needs to play games. He needs to continue to improve. This is a good move for him. Atlanta needs, I think, a veteran, honestly, in that kind of role. Somebody who's going to accept maybe not starting 20 games, 25 games.
What type of player are you thinking?
I think it's a bigger, more physical guy. I think that's the change you need for a game where it's not working. You have to get direct. You have to get a little nasty, a little route one. And Joseph could play off of him, but also...
I'm glad to hear Jason say that because, as you know, he's a student of the game, and oftentimes when someone says that, it can nearly come across as, we're in an era where we talk about control, and you've got the likes of Pep Guardiola dominating, and to say that sometimes you need a big man to maybe swing a ball into can often seem a little bit lazy with analysis, but it's not in this case.
You need it.
And I think the game, especially for me against Toronto, that sort of a player was lacking in the biggest game at the end of the season, where you just needed something. I'm not sure who that player is. I'm not sure if that player exists within Major League Soccer, but maybe, and I'll throw a name out there, someone as a backup striker who had I'm not sure where he is right now, but Will Brewing. Is maybe that sort of a player.
Seattle, injured.
Is he still at Seattle?
Yeah, he got injured this season. That's the type of player you need.
Yeah, I think so. It's maybe it's not the perfect answer. Someone maybe of a higher end than Will Brewing, but I do think that it's going to work out well for both parties.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, think back. I'm glad you mentioned Pep Guardiola and that side of it, because think back to the end of Pep's run in Barcelona, where you'd get into games and teams would bottle them up, and they didn't have that direct play at all. They didn't have anything different, and it was Tata Martino who came in and brought that. And everybody in Barcelona flipped out because there were games where they would win 4-0 but didn't dominate possession. And it's like, that's not our style. Yeah. I think Atlanta at this point, and we've had the conversation on SDH and we've all talked about it, like the style is still developing. The style that I think we want to see is developing. It's not one specific way of playing. It's controlling games. So you can have that where a game just doesn't lend itself. It's not working. You need that change of pace to bring on a guy and get direct, get vertical.
I think we were all probably a little bit more frustrated at times earlier on in the season than we were in previous years because of teams coming here. At Colorado, when Gressel scores in the 75th minute, Cincinnati, where teams are willing to bunker and say, well, do you know what? We know what they have in Joseph Martinez. We know what they have out wide. We know that they've got those intricate, savvy players that are going to come central and try and combine. And Atlanta didn't really have, and Brandon's not really that guy. Yes, he's a big presence, but he's not really that sort of a player. And you mentioned Barcelona. Barcelona went through a bit of an evolution, if you like, when Luis Enrique took over, because he brought in Luis Suarez, and that was a big money signing from Liverpool. Not exactly a Barcelona player, especially for that molded team. Yet what they did then was Busquets did receive the ball, and he'd look up, and instead of having to have to give the ball to Xavi or Iniesta or right and left, he can have that option now to go a little bit more direct to Luis Suarez, and he can hold the ball up and bring Messi in. And that's maybe what Atlanta need. Like you say, it's just something that's going to offer a little bit different.
I do not want to play Cincinnati in U.S. Open Cup.
we need a new U.S. Open Cup hero now.
Yeah. We'll see who that is. I mean, look, if Franco Escobar was the reason why Atlanta United won the MLS Cup, Brandon Vasquez was the reason why Atlanta United won the U.S. Open Cup. There's no doubt about that. So he's a club legend as far as I'm concerned. I wish him nothing but the best. Good guy, too.
We can get a couple more questions because we've been going like 2 hours.
I feel
it
bad
doesn't
for
feel like it
whoever's
at all.
listening to this podcast, man, they had no idea what they were getting into.
Well, I'll start with a statement. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has this story, but as a guy who grew up in a small town an hour outside of Atlanta and was the weird kid because I played soccer and not football or baseball, thank you guys for what you do. My high school, when I was growing up, we couldn't afford to cut anyone at tryouts. And
that's
now,
how I got on a few teams.
Yeah, now my old high school has a varsity team, a JV team, and a middle school team.
That's awesome.
What high school? What school is it?
Central Carroll High School.
That's great.
In Carrollton.
That's awesome.
That's because of the game, but also because of the local coverage. So thank you guys. And bouncing off that, for All three of you having different backgrounds. What was the moment where it wasn't, this thing in Atlanta can work, not just that, but this thing in Atlanta can work and not just awaken a soccer crowd that's been here, but grow it tenfold? So what was that moment for you guys?
What was that for you, Mike?
I've got one. If you want me to go first, have a think about it. The one for me was the Bobby Dodd game. And hands up, who was there? The Miguel Almiron hat-trick game.
Oh. The Houston game.
The Houston game, exactly. May 20th.
Yes.
Thunderstorms. Thunderstorms lasted a long, long time, right? And I'm getting chills even remembering this right now because it was my birthday, May 20th. I'm there. I'm like, this is a disaster. The fans are going to leave. It's going to be a rain-soaked game. Hopefully they get the win. We'll see. And next thing, not a soul left the stadium. Everybody remained there. What happens when the national anthem starts? The audio completely fails. Everybody inside Bobby Dodd completely took over the national anthem. And the chills that Dan, the first thing Dan said straight after the national anthem, he didn't mean to say it on air, he just went, that was so cool. But it was. It wasn't meant to happen. And yet that was the moment for me, certainly, that I'm like, this is just different.
How about you?
It's unusual. It's kind of a negative thing, but the Columbus playoff loss, when I saw how angry people were, and this sounds really weird, but when I was seeing a lot of people that I didn't think really cared about soccer saying things on Twitter and social media and calling into the radio station, really being angry, and same old Atlanta, and why does this happen to all our team? That was the point where I realized, Atlanta United's probably now on the same plane as Falcons, Hawks, Braves.
Yeah.
And it's a negative moment, right? But I think that kind of proved to me, like, well, now wait a minute. We're having the same discussion about Atlanta United that we've had about all of our other teams.
The boos earlier on this year, too. Again, another negative, but one of those moments where, whoa, this is the like the heart and the passion
absolutely
is bleeding through.
Yeah. I mean, and I know what you're going to say, and I think your point about the Houston match is well taken. I think if you were there from the beginning, if you were there at the early Bobby Dodd days, you knew it was going to be a big thing. But to me, what I wasn't sure was, okay, are these just the same 50,000 people over and over who are just really hardcore soccer fanatics, and it's a small but loud and vocal group, or is this more mainstream, is this more widespread? And when I saw people with Braves avatars and people with Rise Up avatars and things like that having strong, passionate takes about losing the playoff match to Columbus, I think that's where I realized, okay, they're the fourth major team right now. They are absolutely on the level of public perception as Falcons, Hawks, Braves.
So there's two different things, and they were kind of at different stages of it for me. The early on in preseason in 2017, when I was driving to Chattanooga and passing people from Atlanta all over the place, and then seeing that game start and just people piling in Atlanta United gear that had probably been on sale for a couple of weeks. 7,000 or 8,000 Atlanta people were there for that, driving 2 hours for a preseason game against an amateur team. Right. That was where I'm like, this is a little different. This is weird. Crazy. But the one before that where I knew it was going to be successful was the ATL Champions League that we did for Soccer in the Streets in 2015, before there was a team name. And Darren had been here for a few months, and we asked him to participate in it, like thinking he would hand over the trophy to the winning team. It was all like supporters groups of European teams. It was the Champions League, but the ATL Champions League. And we asked him to participate, thinking that he'll hand over the trophy, he'll say a couple words, whatever, be a dignitary. He's like, I want to play. And, we just hired Carlos Bocanegra as our technical director. He's going to play too. and yeah, well, but what it was for me when I'm like, this is going to be a real big deal, is anytime Arthur is going to show up at an event like that, you get calls ahead of time, security, you have timelines, everything is set up. We thought Arthur was coming and he'd hang out for a little while and take off. It was hot. It was like 95 degrees there on turf at Grady High School.
Did he play?
He didn't play, but he stayed the whole time. He was not wearing a suit. He was wearing, I think, cargo shorts and a T-shirt. He had the team T-shirt, and he had his visor on backwards, and he was handing water to Darren and Carlos and players coming off the field. And I'm like, this is...
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I bought dozens and dozens of oranges and sliced them all
Yep.
up for the game.
It was...
I mean, we went all out. We had no idea it was going to be like that.
supporters and the team and you had two front office people at the time. But Arthur staying out there in 95 degrees the whole day and handing off water to guys as they come off the field. When people started to question it, nationwide, like, oh, well, Arthur's going to be like Robert Kraft or other owners and not really care. Like, he cares.
Yeah.
Like, he's emotionally invested.
Totally unrelated to the question. Do you remember the reaction in Costa Rica when Arthur walked into that stadium?
Yeah.
Down at Ariano?
We're on the air. And
we're on the air.
Costa Rican radio is like coming in like...
Yeah. Like, is that really the Home Depot guy in Spanish, however they would say? Like,
yeah.
No, like that was a huge deal. Like, whoa, that's Arthur Blank in our stadium.
He had an awesome suite, too, at Ariano.
Oh, yeah, it was like a modified Porto-John. I'm not joking. They
right.
literally cut up a Porto-John and made it like the back wall to his suite, which was a card table and some plywood and a bench.
Yeah.
But
he was
I'll
there,
never
and
forget that.
he loved that. Like,
He loved
to
it,
be
yeah.
in Costa Rica at this tiny little stadium that's old and, I mean, it shook where we were, the radio booth. Like, it was
But it was
wild.
like the Pope walking in, literally.
Yeah.
Like there was this mass, not panic. But just
Radio guys come over,
Yeah.
like, grabbing us.
They couldn't
like,
believe it.
pointing at him. Like, is that him?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Do we have any other questions real quick? Go ahead, Greg. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Greg projects.
Yeah.
Oh, for the show. Okay. So you can see my dilemma. I'm sure everybody in the room can see my dilemma that when Atlanta United plays, do I listen to the radio broadcast? Do I listen to Fox Sports South? Do I do pregame and postgame? Do I do half and a half? So thank you.
See, this is the
thank you
perfect
very
one to end
much.
us.
Thank you very much for what you guys do for us fans. I got a couple of questions I'm curious about. Kevin, the cocktail on the post-game show on the final game, what was it, a blue eel? Electric eel. Was it good, and did you drink it all?
Unbelievable. I couldn't drink it all because before I even knew I had it.
Well, yeah, we
I did
saw
see that. That was good.
Yeah, we did see that. And then your biggest disaster on the road or here.
Road disaster?
Great
I think
question.
I've got the best one.
Well, go ahead. It might be different. If it's what I think, I'll come up with a second.
I had to drive from Lexington, Kentucky to Columbus, Ohio. Yeah, the flight, I was bumped on it that morning and didn't know that was going to happen until everybody else was on the plane. And for some reason, there were no other flights that had tickets to Columbus, to Cincinnati, to Dayton, to Indianapolis. I'm checking everywhere. And I spent 5 years in Lexington when I was in middle school and high school. So I'm like, Lexington's not that far away. So there's a flight. I buy it at the airport. I wait an hour. I get on the plane. The team had set up a rental car, and I drove from Lexington to Columbus, which was fine until I got on the north side of Cincinnati, and then it started pouring down like biblical proportions of rain, and got to the stadium, 90 minutes before kickoff?
Yeah, and found our booth to be completely soaked. And
it got better from there, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was rough. I would say Dallas last year on the 4th of July, the way that we transmit from a road stadium is we plug into Ethernet, and we have basically a giant modem that connects to the Internet and sends a signal back to Atlanta. We plug in, and there's no Internet. And so we ask for the stadium IT that's not uncommon. That has happened before. So we ask for the stadium IT person. It's like this 19-year-old kid. And I go, well, we don't have any Internet. Can you flip a switch or something and back? He goes, yeah, about that. The Internet doesn't work too well out here. We had yeah. Well, I mean, seriously, I was like, I'm going to go down to a concession stand and plug into like a cash register or something like that. He's like, yeah, we don't really have internet here. That was a real problem when we had the bowl game here in January. Neither team could get on the air. So, I don't. Like, you could have told us this before we flew to Dallas to broadcast the game. So Jason and I, we did kind of get like a modified internet signal on, but Jason and I did the game like this. Both
under the headset.
Under the headset, we called the game on the phone, on cell phones.
And Oren, our producer back in Atlanta, was amazing because he is like mixing it back and forth. So when the internet would drop and our headsets would go out on his end, then he would push the phones up.
Right.
And he's having to go back and forth the whole game.
But if you listen to the who scored the first goal, the Swiss guy,
Ziegler.
Reto Ziegler. If you listen to the Reto Ziegler goal, I mean, it's us on a cell phone. We sound like we're on Mars. And I remember being really pissed at the time because that was a dramatic game. I thought, oh, man, I mean, this is going to be a good broadcast. It's a very dramatic game. And then we know what happened in the end, and the broadcast went in the wastebasket anyway. Not a road game, but I would say one other story was up in Kennesaw this year for the Arellano game. I got up to Kennesaw really early because I was worried about traffic. You know how there's a McAllister's like maybe quarter-mile away from the stadium? Yeah. So I walked down there to get a bite to eat, and I got something I should not have eaten, and it didn't really agree with my stomach. And I remember kickoff, and my stomach started feeling a little jacked up. And I'm like, well, okay, all I have to do is get through this and then whatever. And I look at the clock, and it says 1 minute, 30 seconds. I'm like, oh, no, this is going to be a long night. So some people tweeted at me after the game, like, wow, it was great to see you on the concourse right after the game running to the bathroom. Like, yeah, nature calls, not really divulging much more than that. But that was a Alka-Seltzer moment, I guess. That happens, too. But we've been lucky. I mean, most of our trips have been safe. We misconnected going to Portland this year. Which, we'll have stuff like that. But for the most part,
we had a truck get hit by lightning for the twos and catch on fire.
TV truck. Yeah,
that happened. That was fun.
And a big part of all of this, I think, is maybe what you don't see, and hopefully that's us doing a good job because, you know, a control room or a TV truck could be on fire, and you honestly, like, something could be going on, and your producer could be screaming at you, "Hold on, I don't know yet," and then you're thinking, "Okay, I've got to, you know, talk for the next 60 seconds about something, or I've got to figure it out," or you could be leading to something, and they'll say, "Actually, don't go. We don't have that." And I'm not trying to make Eric sound like he doesn't know where he's going, but it happens. It's live TV, and you've got to adjust on air. And that's why some of the best TV hosts, I think of like Ernie Johnson, Rebecca Lowe, some of the very best that you just, they're tremendous at that because you know stuff is going wrong, yet we never know that as a viewer. In terms of, for me, the disasters, I probably had a few when I used to be live at being until 7:30 on a Friday. And then the games would be Saturday, wherever in North America. So I'd have one of the production assistants, Gabby, like something out of the Italian job. She had a little Mini Cooper, and she used to be outside the studio waiting. And as soon as we get off air, I'd say, "Take care, folks. We'll see you Monday. All the best. Run." And then Gabby would like hightail it straight to the airport to try and catch whatever flight it was that week. It was always like getting to the airport with like 30 minutes to go and hope that you can get through and get on it. And then the disaster technical one, Gargan's microphone didn't work for a full half in Vancouver. Do you remember that, Robin?
Oh, yeah.
I had a guy who just did not do his job, simply didn't do his job, and Dan's microphone is out for the whole first half. It was my last game, and I thought if ever there was an audition, you know, that they may want me back. I'm like, throughout the whole first half, I'm thinking, this is going horribly. Because they kept saying to me, as I'm trying to commentate, and Gargan clearly can't get involved, like tapping me, dragging me, taking my mic off me for a sec to try and change things out again. And you'd have spaces of 30, 40 seconds with no one speaking at all when they should have been clear, you know, opportunities or whatever else. That was a disaster. But you move on.
All right, we could keep going all night, but, you know.
I feel awful. I told Leanne, I think this is like 45 minutes to an hour, and I just saw you check the time. I'm like, oh, my God.
Yeah.
So, whoever downloads this podcast and goes all the way, man, if you're listening now, you've made it 2 hours. Congratulations and thank you.
And you guys have hung out 2 hours with us. Thank you so much for coming out. We'll have to do this again. Yeah. I think there's a lot of things we didn't even get into.
Great idea.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.